and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and this week we are going to be running an episode that aired on the show Ridiculous History. Ridiculous History is an amazing podcast. The guys that run it are great, and they're a lot of fun. And I went on there and talked with them about Julie d'Aubigny, La Maupin. And I was really happy with the way the episode came out, and we had a great time. And I thought that this week it might be really fun to share that episode with you guys. So please stay tuned. And here is my appearance on Ridiculous History. Thanks so much.
Ridiculous History is a production of iHeartRadio. Welcome back to the show, Ridiculous Historians. Thank you, as always, so much for tuning in. Let's hear it for the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Max Williams.
Woo!
Our super producer and, indeed, Noel, part-time werewolf. My name is Ben Bolin.
I love the idea of a part-time. I guess everyone's a part-time werewolf. That's sort of the nature of being a werewolf, right?
Yeah. You're not a werewolf all the time. Funny story, dude, I thought it was so badass when I was a kid. I thought I had my future career figured out. I was going to be the first werewolf astronaut on the moon.
That is a really cool hodgepodge of stuff that kids like.
Because then you're always a werewolf, right? It's never not the full moon.
It's a problem. When you transform, you're going to rip through your spacesuit and then freeze to death and or implode in the cold vacuum of space.
I will say
Unless your werewolf powers save you from that, which I'm not sure how that works.
I will say thank you to the good folks at NASA who did write a response to a young...
No, they did not.
Yeah, they did.
Was it werewolves aren't real, bro? Dumb kid, go to school.
It was very kind. I think my mom framed it. But
I would have loved it though if NASA had called you bro. I don't know why that's the voice that I chose for NASA's response.
It'd be badass. And speaking of,
you keep saying that word. It's almost like you're hinting at something.
It's like we're doing a segue. We are immensely fortunate, fellow ridiculous historians, to be talking about generally badass things. Also, we just found out we can say ass on the air, right? Without having to beep it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
If we can't, then what is it all for?
So we are joined with a guest, a friend of the show, a person we have followed for quite some time, separately and together, the creator of Badass of the Week, Ben Thompson, born in Nottingley, Yorkshire, England in 1843.
Mm-hmm. That's the one, right?
I was so tempted to do like a British accent, which I can't do. And so I was like very like, hello. I was really tempted to come in with that.
Accent. By the way, Ben Thompson, aren't you sick of these Brits sounding like better English speakers than we do in television shows? And then when you find out that they're Brits, you like feel betrayed, like they've been lying to you all this time.
Idris Elba.
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah. You're like, what was this, like Superman, Batman, like Spider-Man? They're all British now.
I know. It doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't sit
They're
right
beating
with
us
me.
at acting in our own accent,
it's
right?
Downright un-American, I would say.
They asked, oh man, who was House? I'm blanking on his name right now.
Hugh
they asked Hugh
Laurie.
Laurie. Yeah, they asked Hugh Laurie
Bit of Fry and Laurie. Yeah,
about asking, about acting for House, and he was like, yeah, acting with an American accent is kind of like trying to act with marbles in your mouth. It's like, great.
That's so insulting.
He's also an amazing jazz pianist.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Yeah.
He is, in his own right, he is, I guess, a badass. Let's give him his flowers. Ben, you created Badass of the Week in 2004. And that's how Noel and I originally followed you. You know, we love your work, and you have appeared on previous episode of Ridiculous History.
Kind of werewolf related.
Talking about werewolves. Yeah, this is the second time I've heard the astronaut werewolf story, actually.
Yeah. I always think of you, Ben. I always think of you.
So April 2004. So this is, this month is the 20-year 20-year anniversary of the website. It's crazy.
Congratulations.
20 years.
Yeah.
Wild, right?
Do you feel old, sir?
All the time.
Yeah, same.
Every time I try to get out of bed.
Oh, jeez. Well, we have asked you to join us again because you always have an amazing investigation of things that we call ridiculous history, but also super badass stuff. And in our previous episode, which everyone should check out, fast forward through the werewolf story.
We had a different take on it last time, so it was not the exact same story.
It's different.
It was an exciting twist to hear that NASA had written you back. That was new information.
They did,
me.
And called you bro.
Humble
and
brag.
called you bro. Yeah, that's what I heard.
We'll check the letter while we're checking the receipts. Ben, tell us, if you could, tell Noel, Max, and all of us ridiculous historians about Julie.
Okay, so last time I was here, I talked about the Kung Fu werewolf, right? Tai Jin. He's, the story was that he was like a Shaolin master who had some sort of condition where he grew hair like everywhere and he looked like a werewolf. And so the way that he's described sometimes is as the Kung Fu werewolf. That story was like kind of a mess in terms of being able to, place any of this stuff historically. It's a lot of myth and legend around him. We're pretty sure he was a real guy, but a lot of we wanted to tell we told the action movie version of his life, but
right.
It was kind of hard to pin down exact details, even down to when he was born, kind of thing. Julie Domi is a bit of a different story here. So she is, she's not the Kung Fu werewolf. She is a bisexual opera singing sword fighter from 17th century France. Yes.
I love all of those things.
All of these things are great. Yes. She killed or wounded at least 10 men in duels. She performed as like the lead contralto for the Paris Opera, which was like the biggest opera in the world at the time.
Hold the phone really quick. I'm so sorry to bother you and interrupt, but a contralto.
Yes.
I have a pretty decent opera background. Both of my parents sang. I don't think I fully can wrap my head around what vocal range a contralto is.
I didn't know either because I have no opera background whatsoever. But apparently it's deep.
It's deep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a female baritone or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay,
something
got
like that.
It. Sorry, my opera brain just pinged at that one. I'm like,
yeah,
I must know. Please carry on with the important parts of the story.
Deep singing voice, probably singing badass stuff, right? She will act as, she will perform as characters like Medea and all of these kind of badass women from mythology as well, which is cool. And she did also once, the hook for her is that she once took holy orders so that she could sneak into a convent and have sex with a nun. So.
And holy orders, by the way, are the thing in monastic society, in nunneries, where you have to say, I give my life to God. I will just be like a bride of Jesus Christ in this situation. And then she did this on purpose, right?
She became a nun in order to sneak into a convent, and because her girlfriend had been sent to a nunnery. So she broke in that way.
And a lot of people were non-consensually sent to nunneries at that time.
Because they'd shamed the family or something like that, right?
Right. We'll get to it.
Ben, have you seen the Paul Verhoeven movie Benedetta?
No, I am generally a Paul Verhoeven fan, but I have never seen it.
It's relatively recent, and it is a intensely wild, highly sexual nun story about like this badass nun who basically believes that she is Jesus's kind of concubine, basically. And then she has these visions, but there's also a lot of bisexual kind of like lesbian stuff that goes on in it, and it's a very heavily sacrilegious film, but it is a wild ride. And what you're describing here kind of reminds me of some things in that.
I'm trying to picture this through the lens of Starship Troopers and RoboCop.
Verhoeven's a weird art house guy.
I know. He went over and he started doing that.
There is a RoboCop cameo. To be
great.
Clear.
It's true.
I'm in
one of the visions. Yes, exactly.
But the thing with her versus Taijin is a lot of her stuff is we can document it, right? There are some details after she became kind of a legendary figure in France. So there were a lot of, after her death in like, the late 17th century, there started to be a lot of like basically erotic fan fiction novels written about her that elaborate on her story a bit. But we're going to try to distill out that information and try to stick to
Verhoeven
the
knew
real
this story.
Right. Yeah.
Positive.
Right.
So we're talking then 1600s, right?
1600s. Yeah. She's born in 1673.
Okay, 1673. And what were the circumstances of her, upbringing? Where was she royalty? Was she impoverished? Where does Julie come from?
Okay. So let's get into her backstory. I do want to say one quote about her before we get going. There was a French writer named Théophile Gautier, and he described her as beautiful, deadly, valiant, and supremely unchaste, which I love.
Unchaste.
Supremely so.
Oh my
Supremely
gosh.
unchaste.
I love it.
This is
In every
gonna be-
possible
this is gonna be
way.
a good
This
story.
person already has my heart. I'm absolutely crushing on Julie.
Yeah, this is gonna be that Paul Verhoeven movie mixed with, I don't know, maybe the Three Musketeers with Tim Curry.
Absolutely.
Like Brotherhood of the Wolf or something, Yeah.
Let's go.
All right, let's go. So she's born in 1673. She is not royalty, but her father is a guy named Gaston d'Aubigny. Gaston, like Beauty and the Beast.
We were all thinking it.
Yep. He was the Grand Squire of France, which means that he's the guy that helped train horses for Louis XIV, the Sun King. So this is what the time period we're think like Versailles, think Three Musketeers, think that kind of time period.
Everyone intensely smelly. Apparently Louis XIV was very averse to bathing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? You wouldn't think that.
Three baths his entire life.
That's right.
Wow.
And he probably just covered himself in oils and liniments and things,
We did an episode about soap, and that was one of the things where he was convinced that bathing is how you got sick and died.
And his baths, those 3 baths, most of them were not consensual.
Yeah. It's like when you try to bathe a cat,
Right. Just so.
Kicking and screaming.
And I think our pal AJ Jacobs pointed this out as well. The past smelled different and not in a good way.
Bro, even when we were talking to Mo Rocco recently, I don't remember exactly how it came up, but he's like, back in the 70s, everyone just kind of smelled like BO all the time. So we've come a long way. Imagine if that was the late 70s. Imagine what the 1600s must have been like. I'm sorry, we're just trying to paint a picture here.
Yeah. I remember there was a story about the Anglo-Saxons when they didn't like the Vikings. And one of the things that they complained about with the Vikings was that the Vikings would bathe once a week. So
Monsters,
the Anglo-Saxon
savages.
women liked them more than they liked the Anglo-Saxon men.
Well, they were
And
also
so the guys
cut and beefcake AF.
That was their culture war.
Yeah, these guys bathe once a week and they put butter in their hair to make it kind of shiny and look nice.
Flowing locks. I mean, give me a break. Sign me up.
I mean, I'd be kind of grumpy, I think, if like an army of Chris Hemsworth showed up and started,
There we go.
started living in my neighborhood.
These guys got to go.
gotta get them.
we know how things worked out for the French monarchy overall. But that's kind of like every time we examine a story in the United States right before the Great Depression. They didn't see a revolution on the way. This is pre-revolution.
Mm-hmm.
The era of King Louis is an era of absolute monarchy, right?
Yes. So this is Louis XIV. France is the dominant superpower in the world right now, right? This is an absolute monarchy. They are a world superpower. And they will continue to be for a while. The French Revolution isn't going to be for at least another 100 years, right? It's going to be, I think Louis XVI is the one that is overseeing that. So 14th, this is like a golden age of French history, right?
Yeah, 16 pushed it too far. 14, fine. Just a smelly guy.
Just such a weird thing to think about, because when you picture him, you picture like all these portraits of him and stuff. He's always very elaborately dressed. You always picture him with like 5 servants, like putting cloaks on him and whatever. But I never bathed. I didn't know that. I just learned that today.
Well, 3 times. 3 times he bathed.
Okay.
But not all. Not all of those baths were consensual. Yeah.
Right.
So if we go back, as you said, there's this halcyon era. Mm-hmm. France, the global superpower, an absolute monarchy. The king is, for most people in Western Europe, the king is the closest thing to God, right, on earth.
Yeah, I mean, literally, if you insult him, it is like insulting God, right? Like he is. I mean, the deal with absolute monarchy was that, like, God wants me to rule over you. And if you have a problem with that, you have a problem with God. And this is at a time when everybody is extremely religious and extremely, like, devoted to not getting their heads cut off by crazy kings.
I'm still into that. I am super into, I think my head and my neck get along really well. I don't know about you guys. I'd like to keep that combo going.
Yes.
Although I am curious if you do, in fact, keep seeing the world for a few minutes from like a rolling type viewpoint.
I've heard that. So when they would decapitate with the guillotine and like grab the head by the hair and hold it up in front of the crowd, and the crowd was cheering, there is some evidence that you can continue to see for a few moments after your head is severed.
I mean, in some particularly macabre like representations of that in film, you do even see the face the eyes move still, and like the face kind of twitch. You just wonder if that's all just muscle happens. Spasms. Yeah. I think it's right. I don't know, but not worth it for just to find out, F around and find out. But it is something I think about often, perhaps weirdly often.
What a weird disclaimer. I'm glad we made it. No, folks, don't cut people's heads off.
Don't do it.
I know everybody gets in situations, but the best way to be an executioner, the best way to handle a guillotine is not to use one.
The French don't even use them anymore.
We'll see. Okay. So Julie's father is...
Yes. So Gaston d'Aubigny, he is the secretary to the Grand Squire of France. Now, secretary, you have certain ideas of what that means, but for this guy, he's kind of like the assistant. He was not a nobleman, but he's kind of juiced in with the nobles. His job is to train aristocrats to ride horses and sword fight. So that's like a thing that all the great courtiers need to know. Like the noble families, they need to train their kids that. So this is what he's a fighting instructor, and he's a horseback riding instructor, and whatever other things that were considered manly at the time, which I think dancing is one of them, right? I think he was also a dance instructor.
What? This guy rides horses. He break dances. Mm-hmm. Are you kidding? Okay.
Hey, the French love the pop and lock, right? They're all about that still, I think.
Yeah, we know. Right.
Also, like the street performers, the robot kind of situation. They're really good at that. Mm-hmm. I think it all stems from mime, which I believe is a treasured French art form.
Yeah, they're never going to live that mime thing down, are they?
Why are people so hateful of mimes? I think it's a really delightful skill set. Like, people are so mean to mimes.
Yeah, well, the
clowns are way weirder.
The mimes have never had a chance to respond in an interview.
It's funny, Ben, because they're always stuck in a box. I can't get out. How do I get out of this box?
Okay, so this guy is basically what we would call not royalty, but pretty well-to-do.
Yeah, he's doing good. Like he doesn't have the bloodline, but he's friends with all these guys, and and he's training not only aristocrats, he's training members of the king's personal bodyguard, right? Riding horses, fighting, they're
Is he like that thing in military films where there's a hard-nosed, non-commissioned officer, like a sergeant level kind of guy?
Something like that. I mean, I honestly just picture Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, just like whipping a bunch of legs, a bunch of French aristocrats into shape. Like I kind of picture him in that same vein as Gaston from the
Eating 3 dozen eggs,
Right, yeah.
in one go.
But one thing that he does is he trains his daughter in this. He has a daughter, it's his only child, and he trains her in these same arts, right? This is what he does. He trains sword fighting, he trains horseback riding. She's with me, like we're gonna do this together. These are skills that in 1673 are not often taught to women, but Julie picks it up right away. That's going pretty well. She's kind of one of the guys. She's fighting. She's riding horseback, all this stuff. But then around the time she's like 16, she starts having an affair with her dad's boss, the Count d'Armagnac, the Grand Squire of France. So Gaston's like, okay, that's a bit of a problem for me. So he does what you would do if you were a dad in this situation in 17th century France. He marries her off to calm her down. He marries her to a nice older French clerk named Monsieur Maupin. And he's like, okay, well, you're married to Monsieur Maupin. Now you go live with him. That should calm everything down.
I don't know, man. Julie doesn't seem like the type to settle down.
Yeah. She went to his house. She could have the noblewoman's life now because she was married into nobility. There's like a little manor outside of Paris. Julie Daubigny, she could just settle down, relax. This is not her. And we are going to see her character very soon. But she is not interested in any of this stuff. She is fierce, determined, strong, good at fighting, good at horseback riding, better than the other boys. And she's not going to just kind of settle down and marry this kind of, I just picture this kind of boring older French clerk. He will not be in the story any longer. She leaves and she
lost me at French clerk.
Like, yeah, okay, that is the end of Monsieur Maupin's participation in this story.
So this guy's like a milquetoast sort of dude, and
yeah.
Is he out of town a lot? Is that what happens?
No, she's out of town a lot. She bails. She runs away. Right? She leaves him.
Yeah, let's focus on her. She's way more interesting. Than
He's milquetoast is a great word for him. She takes off, and she will refer to herself as La Maupin, like Madame Maupin, just because I think sometimes like being a married woman allows her to get away with some things that she might not have been able to.
From that, even just being connected with nobility in that way, probably got you in some doors, right?
Agency in a patriarchy as well, right?
Exactly, right. So she takes off, she keeps the name, and that's about it. She starts sleeping with a wandering sword fighter named Saran, and starts wandering the Marseille region, traveling with this sword fighter.
Wait, Ben, hold on. A wandering sword fighter?
Is that kind of like a mercenary, sort of a sellsword, or is he just looking for a fight? He's just always out there, like just grumpily wandering around looking for someone to cross blades with.
Yeah.
Well, so this will be a thing. I mean, we see this in feudal Japan as well. So like one thing, like when we're talking about Musashi and stuff, right? So one of the things that's happening is, France at this time is the dominant power in Europe. They have huge swaths of land. They're not at a war right now. So there's a lot of guys who are good at fighting with nothing to do. So what they do is they travel around and they fight each other. But you were talking about the people who dance in public squares. These guys would put on fighting demonstrations in public squares, non-lethal, cool. like blunted rapiers.
Sparring.
But yeah, you fight this other guy. People bet money on it, or
like at a Ren
you
fair.
Put in money. Yeah, exactly. Right. You put in money. They put in money. Like a traveling boxing match, right? Like
it'd be cool if you could bet on the joust at the Ren fair. Got a feeling it's a little bit of a predetermined outcome in those situations. So
hey. You can bet on anything.
That's true. I like to bet on myself.
Yeah, I like to bet. I like to bet that this story is going to some unexpected places. But Ben, every time you bring us a badass, it is so cinematic, right? And as you said, this is different from our Japanese werewolf taijin because there is documentation. So up to this point, we know this. We know that Maupin, Madame Maupin, has taken up with a wandering swordsman. Mm-hmm. That's true. Yep. It's not a euphemism, to be clear, right? It'd be a funny one, but okay. So she's out with this guy busking.
busking, and she starts participating, right? So that's the what ends up happening with her. She's traveling, and this guy puts on these fighting demonstrations, and she's like, she puts them on with him. So they'll fight together, or they'll fight each other. They'll fight anybody from the crowd. Come on up here. We've got an extra. I'll bet whatever that I can beat you in a sword fight.
That's cool.
Oh, yeah. And all the dudes were like convinced they could take out a woman. Right?
Yeah, I can take her. Yeah,
they're like,
exactly.
They're like, a woman with a sword?
Scandalous.
Yes. And so, well, that is going okay. They're making money, right? It's interesting, right? It's more interesting than the typical public fighting demonstration. Like, oh, this is a woman. And she's dressed in man's clothes. She's wearing pants. What is this? She's dressed up like a man, but it's a woman? What? And so, yeah, so they put on these fighting demonstrations, and that's going pretty well, except at some point, Saran pisses somebody off. Probably on account of one of these demonstrations. They end up fighting, he ends up fighting a real duel with the guy behind a monastery, and Saran kills the guy with the sword in the sword fight. Okay. So, yeah, that's bad. But it's not necessarily the murder. It's not a murder charge because it was a fair duel. The problem is that at this point, dueling is illegal in France. Right. You're not supposed to duel. Okay, you think about like the Musketeers, everybody's dueling, everybody's sword fighting all the time. Sure. But and it was common, right? You have all these warriors with no war to fight, so they're all fighting each other. Everybody's defending each other's honor and all of that stuff, slapping with the white gloves. But dueling was made illegal by Louis XIV because he was tired of all these French aristocrats killing each other behind monasteries. He was like, we're wasting a lot of good guys here with this stupid stuff. Right. Can we please stop dueling?
What would economists call it? A diminishing return.
Yes,
right?
Yes. I'd rather have this guy available if I need him for a war than have him die trying to defend his stupid honor over nothing, right? Okay, so maybe this is not such a bad thing for Saran, except that Saran actually ends up getting a warrant out for his arrest. And this is actually like a lot of people, even though dueling was outlawed, a lot of people were still dueling. So Saran's a little surprised until he realizes that the warrant for his arrest was signed by the Count d'Armagnac, the Grand Squire of France, Julie's ex-lover.
Whoa. And at the time, that was totally legal. No one was
he wasn't wanted for murder. He was wanted for illegal dueling.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so they were going to arrest him. So him and Maupin have to go on the run together, of course.
Romantic.
Yes. So they keep traveling around putting on sword fighting exhibitions, but they've got to like move every couple days, put it on in a different place because they got to make money and stuff. But yeah. And eventually like Julie starts becoming a bit of an attraction because like I said, she's a singer and she eventually starts singing while she's doing the sword fighting.
Like trash talking? Like making up little songs on the fly?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Like freestyle rapping, like rap battle sword fight, right? So picture like a bar like Gaston would hang out at, like wood paneled, rowdy people drinking, all this stuff.
Out of giant mugs.
Yes, sloshing beer all over the floor. And then a woman in man's clothing gets on the stage with a sword and the big boots, the big hat, the musketeer kind of hat. She's dressed like the Count of Monte Cristo or something. And she starts singing like operatic contralto, deep voice. She's holding the sword and she's challenging people in the crowd to come up and fight her.
This sounds like a hoot. I want to be there. I'm picturing
to see this, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, people will throw money on the stage because they're happy with the show, or people will throw money on the stage to be like, this is what I'm going to bet that I can beat you in a sword fight, right? And she will get up there, and the guy, and this is 17th century France. Like everybody knows how to sword fight here. It's not like a random weird thing that like this is everybody here knows how to fight with a sword because that's all you got, right? You have a sword and you have one of those flintlock one-shot pistols.
Right. Right. Which is, what is that going to do?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like your opener or your closer.
Right. Yeah. So everybody's trained in how to fight with a sword. So these guys get up on the stage and she starts kind of like dueling with them and singing about them, making fun of them and how they're dressed and how bad they are at sword fighting.
She's doing an 8 Mile. Basically,
I was really half joking when I said that, but I love so much.
This is totally true.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
She would try to time the disarm with the song. So like kind of like end with the note and the disarm at once.
So she's like she's playing with him a little bit. She's parrying maybe until she gets to her closing note.
That's the thing, right? In order to prolong it with that level of precision, you have to be like a cat playing with a mouse that's half dead, or just sort of like toying with it, right?
Yeah, I picture like Neo at the end of The Matrix, right? Like
a particular word comes to mind already, y'all, and I think you know what it is. It's badass, but please, I know it's just going to get better.
Yeah. Okay. Well, she's doing all this and she's kind of gaining this celebrity. And one interesting thing that's happening for her is after these demonstrations, everybody likes her and all the men are fawning over her or whatever because she's very beautiful. She has this auburn hair, these piercing blue eyes. She's, very attractive to everybody. But there are women at these bars that come up to her and like they think she's dressed like a man. This is doing some weird things for them. And so she starts getting a lot of attention from women and she realizes she really likes it, which is...
Forgive me, sir. You are the handsomest man I have ever seen.
Yes.
Right?
That sort of thing.
So she had been sort of bi-curious up to this point, but now she's getting some legitimate attention and she's starting to realize that maybe this is sort of her vibe.
She likes it, yeah. This is also illegal, like dueling. It's also illegal to take up with a woman if you are a woman in France at this time, but
not necessarily a man with a man, right? Or no, is that also illegal?
I think that's also illegal.
Unless you were like Louis the 14th, you probably just did
unless you were an aristocrat.
Right, yeah, you can do whatever you want.
It's sort of like alcohol in Saudi Arabia now.
Right, yes. If nobody sees you but the bartender, it's fine.
Right. So this life as essentially a dangerous, notable performer with fans, she is getting a lot of notoriety, right? It's sort of a maverick character.
Yes. She is kind of, becoming one of the most popular of these people who do this. Now, Maupin has a bit of a problem here. So it's 1693 now, and Saran is still wanted. So they still got to kind of pick up and move every couple of days. He's still wanted for dueling, and at this point they've upped the charge to murder because they're annoyed that he's leaving. They can't find him. And also the other problem is that Maupin's getting attention from women. She likes it. Saran is a wanted murderer, and most importantly, she has gotten to the point where she can beat him at sword fighting whenever she wants. So this guy has outlived his usefulness. He's gone. She ditches him.
Heartbreaker.
How are you not making films, Ben? Because
right.
I am like seeing the structural acts right here.
Oh yeah, and Zero Shades you personally, Ben. But I thought, how has this not already been made into a film? It's just got all of the beats, right?
That's the thing. So this is a popular story in France, and like I said, at the beginning, this was her story. They made operas about it. They've made plays about it, all in French. They've written, like I said, erotic novels, like fan fiction, basically about her. She kind of becomes
rippers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She becomes kind of this, adventuring like female James Bond. Like there's a series of books written about her, after her death. But it's all in French. It's a popular story, but it's just there's not much about it in English, and I feel like there should be.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't know why. I can't explain why nobody has paid me money to write this movie yet.
Well, luckily for us, this is Ridiculous History, and my pals Noel, Max, and I are starting a little thing we call the Ridiculous Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, it's a first. No one's ever attempted anything like this before.
Ever. This is 100% original. So okay. There's this moment though, which we're at here, kind of a fulcrum, and it is such a trope in stories, right? You're talking about the student becoming the teacher.
Yeah. She had learned from her dad, and then she had learned from Saran, and now she beats him. She leaves him, and she starts sleeping with...
Wait. So she sword fights with him. They have the duel. Let's picture it.
This is exactly how I would write this, right? If we were going to do the cinematic universe version of this.
Yeah. Okay, so Ben, set the scene as you see it, because I'm seeing is it on a cliff?
Real set piece kind of vibe,
Yeah, the big duel. He's like, I taught you everything you know, and they're fighting, and she has to defeat him in sword fighting, and then kind of walk away
Well, of course, it ends with her having the blade to his throat.
Yeah,
Of course.
As he's down on the ground.
On the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, and then he
the wind blowing.
He submits to her, and finally you see that he realizes that the student has become the teacher. And he can't even be mad. He's almost proud, you know?
Right. You can see, we have a shot of his eyes and then like a
nod.
flower wafting
Yes.
in
And
the
then it's
wind.
like, you go take on the world, girl. You
She
got
says,
this.
I will give you your life, but you no longer possess my respect.
We're going to workshop this. I think we're going in slightly different directions.
Yeah, we're derailing.
It's really, no. It's a wonderful
it's
thing.
perfect. I think it's coherent.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But okay, so she leaves. Now she is something quite controversial in France at the time. A woman with her own agency who fights better than the dudes.
Who is also a lesbian.
Who is also living in Marseille with another woman. She is living
pretty openly, right? Like she doesn't really
yes.
give an F, you know, right?
Yeah, she is sleeping with the daughter of a wealthy merchant in Marseille. She's this like beautiful young blonde woman named Cecilia Bortigali, and that's going great. They're crushing it.
And of course, we think of France as being pretty early on the sexual liberation bandwagon, but this is even before that. And it's honestly probably because of figures like this that it became more widely accepted.
Yeah,
so
I think
quickly,
so. I think
right?
there's something to that, right? Yeah, Monsieur Bortigali is a well-respected 17th century Frenchman, and his lovely daughter is now having a torrid affair with a wandering swordsman,
AKA Mr. Portugal, which sounds like a I don't know, like a cartoon villain or something, or like a boss, a mob boss.
Mr. Portugal is 100% the name of a 90s backpack rapper from Williamsburg.
I love that.
Yeah,
Let's
I
go
can
with
see that.
AKA Mr. Portugal. You know, you might have heard him on some Wu-Tang.
See, I was gonna go with like a Gin Blossoms vibe like band, you know, like,
a little Counting Crows-esque, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think we're also construing it with Portugal the Man.
The Man,
you know?
right? Which is a great band,
Yes.
to be honest. Oh, they're fine. All right, talking about different
No,
directions.
I'm joking.
Jeez.
They're good. I don't get all the hype sometimes. I like a couple of their songs quite a lot.
Don't
though.
let the hype ruin things.
It's hard
You know
not
what
to
I
let
mean?
the hype ruin things.
Don't let the hype ruin things. Be your own person. Have your own agency, just like Maupin.
I do try. It's hard. It's hard to be this badass and like self-possessed. So at this point now, she's off on her own, living her best life
With
probably
Cecilia.
ruffling some feathers along the way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Mr. Portugal does a thing that he has available to him. Gaston married Maupin off to stop the affair that he didn't like. Mr. Portugal sends Cecilia to a nunnery to solve his problem. He ships her off to get thee to a nunnery.
And to be clear, this is both ridiculous and evil, like a candy cigarette. It was common at this time. For families to send daughters that they found problematic off to a convent.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she's a lesbian. This is against God. You need to go find God. You're going to be a nun now. This is going to solve all of our problems. You won't make me look bad in front of my friends in Marseille anymore. So he forces her to become a nun, which is a thing that happened to women in the 17th century. So what does Julie Daubigny do? We have seen a very fiery person, a person who does not like to be told what to do or when she should do it or who she should do it with. So this is the bit from the top where she goes to Avignon, goes to the convent that Cecile has been basically imprisoned at, and tells them that she wants to become a nun.
Okay.
Because you could just volunteer. I mean, they needed folks, right? Like
you still can.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, we can't.
No. But I mean, they didn't necessarily, there wasn't a test or anything. They didn't check your religious bona fides. Like, just
they
by
didn't
virtue
check
of
that she was
showing
married, because you're not really supposed to be a nun if you're married.
Yeah. So maybe that's bad on them. But in general, I think, you're supposed to just take them at face value. Like, yes, okay, this person's giving their life to God. Awesome. Come right on in.
We are going to find that Maupin is very good at finding lovers, both man and woman. She's very good at convincing people to do things that you wouldn't expect her to be able to convince them to do.
Oh, she has Riz.
She has Riz, yeah. I learned that recently. 18 charisma, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so she convinces the convent to accept her. I don't know whether that's a nice sized bag of gold or like a really decent sob story, but she is made a nun at the same convent where Cecilia is. And in the cinematic version of this, I'm picturing Cecilia like being sad in the cloister, and then the nun shows up and like pulls the hood back. What are you doing here?
Max, thank you so much for the music I know you just put in on this, because that is the moment, the big reveal, right? But Ben, riddle me this: Does our protagonist stay a nun for the rest of her life?
No.
Oh, who'd have thought?
She escapes and breaks out Cecilia in a way that is pretty crazy. This is like we're getting into one of the crazier parts of the story, if you can believe it. We're not. So here's what happens: they start they're hooking up in the convent, which I imagine is not very easy to do when you're surrounded by nuns who are frowned on, that sort of thing, and they start planning an escape. And so here's what they do. It doesn't take them very long to plan their escape. So one day, one of the older nuns passes away, and the convent has a big funeral for her. So Julie Domi waits a couple of days after the funeral and sneaks out at night and digs up the dead nun and puts her in Cecilia's bed. Then sets it on fire.
Jesus.
And then in the flame and the confusion, the two of them flee the convent under the cover of flame and darkness. And when the nuns go to find where the fire started, it's in Cecilia's room. Oh, there's a burned up dead body in Cecilia's room. Oh, I don't know what happened, but she must have died. Yeah.
Sure.
So she helps Cecilia
classic ruse, the old switcheroo.
Yep.
You get in situations. Yeah.
Dug up a dead body to fake Cecilia's death, and escaped.
Okay, first off, objectively ghoulish, but
yes.
Also quite successful, yeah?
Yeah, it worked. And, this is one of those stories that you would think would come from like the erotic fan fiction, but we know this happened because Maupin will be arrested for this crime, and there's public record of her arrest. So they find out that it's not Cecilia. They figure out what happened.
But how? I mean, it seems this is a golden era for being able to perpetrate these types of switcheroos because there's no DNA testing. There's really no photography. Well, there's photography, but it would be like kind of like there's no photography. No, nothing like that. It would be paintings at the very best.
It's like forensic woodcuts.
That's right.
At this point,
no.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the body just didn't burn. Like the plan was solid, but maybe the body just didn't burn up enough, and they figured out who it was. And she's gone, and Maupin's gone.
Maybe people found that a grave had been desecrated.
You know what I mean?
Any number
rebury it very well.
It's a good point.
So the law is once again after her, right? And
this time they catch her. So they catch her. They put her. They take her to court. And for the crime of for what she did, they sentenced her to death by burning at the stake, like a witch.
Oh, what?
Yeah,
that's a little extreme. Is that something that's only reserved for like women who are perceived as being like beyond like just so wicked and harloty or something like that?
They burned dudes at the stake. I blame big firewood because I think that was a part of it.
Here's the weird thing about that though is that in the court documents they refer to her as Monsieur Maupin. They refer to her as a man in the court documents because while digging up the dead nun and setting the convent on fire and all of that stuff is pretty scandalous, the lesbian relationship was super scandalous. So Monsieur Maupin is sentenced to death by burning at the stake.
Whoa!
Similar to Joan of Arc, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is. I think this is what they did to witches, right? And so maybe it was like the fact that this happened to a holy person in a holy place. Maybe there's something to that.
Oh, yep. It's a crime against God on several counts, right?
Yeah. So what does Maupin do? She flees. She gets away and she flees into the countryside.
Yeah.
Yet she continues doing her sword fighting and singing exhibitions. So she's popping up and down. She's traveling down the Loire River and performing once a night at these various taverns and bars, and then getting out of town before the law realizes where she's at.
This is amazing because she's rolling up to women and men, perhaps after an exhibition, and saying, "I like your vibe. I've only got one night in town. I'm on the run, you see."
Yes.
That's a lot of
wanted
charisma.
person.
Would she have been traveling under a different name or using a stage name
Good
of
question.
any kind?
It seems likely because we know that she was doing this sort of thing. She uses her own name at a club in Paris 3 months after she has escaped her death sentence. So it's safe to assume she is traveling under assumed names around this time and moving around, because she's traveled a big distance from Avignon to Paris, and she's making money somehow, and so it seems likely that she's doing that. And because she was performing at this club in her name, it's kind of it seems likely.
Well, and again, despite me being maybe about 200 years early on the photography tip, this would have been a time when you really could elude the law for extended periods of time just by using a clever disguise and an assumed name, and just by being crafty, because there just weren't the same kinds of surveillance state kind of situations that exist.
I'm picturing
today.
like a Dungeons and Dragons wanted poster, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's
Wouldn't you call her kind of a rogue? Would she be a bit roguish?
She's very much a rogue.
roguey.
Yeah.
She's a bit swashbucklery. Yeah.
Also, I'm just going to say a lot of people.
Bard, perhaps.
Yeah.
a
rogue bard.
She dual class. She dual classed it. She's doing the multi-class.
She probably could dual wield, from time to time if she needed to.
Seems
in a
likely.
pinch. Yeah.
I bet her dexterity was crazy too, because we can tell she can fight.
Yeah, and she's using a rapier, which is a dexterity-based weapon.
We've already established her charisma score is through the roof.
Yeah, she's high charisma.
Okay, everybody, welcome to Ridiculous History Presents Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragify history.
I will definitely DM for you guys if you want.
Are you serious?
I can totally run
so
that
on
for you.
board.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Well, after this, I'm going to resume my brand new game of Fallout 4, which, while it's not Dungeons and Dragons, it has a similar structure.
Similar vibe. Yeah,
Man,
you get the idea. Plus, the show's awesome. So,
Hey, wait, have you played Baldur's Gate 3, Ben?
So I have not. I have purchased it. I have downloaded it. I haven't installed it. But I'm finishing off this one book that I'm working on. And my deal is I cannot open that application until I have completed the book. That will be my reward. I will take 2 weeks off and I will play this game. But it's a black hole. Once I open it, I'm done. Right? That's the end of it for me. So I don't want to know anything about it. I haven't played it, but everybody loves it. I know it's great. I know I need to play it, but I'm ready. I need one more week to finish this book off, and then I'm diving into it.
Well, we believe in you. We know you can do it, and we look forward to hearing how you enjoy the game when you get to reward yourself.
And for everyone playing along at home, as you doubtlessly know, our pal, Ben Thompson, has a podcast called Badass of the Week. You may be thinking, what happens to Julie? There is an entire show about it, much more in depth. We have not even, Ben, would you say that we have not yet begun to spar with this bard?
Well, I mean, I guess here's what I'll say, because right now she's currently sentenced to death. She's gonna kill at least 7 more people, and we haven't even gotten to the bit where she starts to star for the Paris Opera. She has to deal with this murder conviction thing first. She goes to the court of Versailles and kills a guy on Louis XIV's front steps. Somebody takes she's making out with some woman in Versailles in front of Louis XIV. And these 3 guys take exception to it, ask her to go outside. And she leaves all 3 of them bleeding in the front of Versailles.
Noel and I were talking about this off air, and Noel, you were saying to Ben, what's a one of the craziest moments.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's hard to encapsulate the entire life of a human being, especially one who is so roguish and bardly and badass as this one, into a single podcast. So we were kind of looking for give us a big splashy moment, to take us out on, and then people can, read more about this incredible character on your site and listen on your podcast. But yeah, take us home.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I guess I'll tell that story. So she has managed to expunge her record. She gets back, she gets the death sentence waived by Louis XIV personally.
What the? No. What?
Yes.
He's the king. It's an absolute monarchy.
Breaks into the Comte d'Armagnac's castle, her former lover, breaks into his castle, is sitting in his dressing room when he comes home. And is like, hey, I need a favor. And he writes a letter to Louis XIV, who publicly pardons her for her crimes.
Wow.
Then she goes to Versailles later. A bunch of other stuff happens. She joins the Paris Opera. She becomes this big rock star, basically, in Paris. She goes to Versailles for a royal ball, right? Think Cinderella kind of deal. Marie Antoinette vibes, right? It's not Marie Antoinette time period yet, but that's the vibe.
Oh, yeah, big hair.
Yeah, big hair. She's there dressed as a man. With the sword on her belt. She's a famous actress, right? She is dancing with every girl there and making out with most of them.
Just daggering, bumping and grinding, making a real spectacle.
Exactly. And these three guys were all suitors of the one girl that Julie was making out with. But the way they didn't say that they're jealous that they got shown up by a girl. They say that this is what you're doing is disrespectful to Louis XIV, and we need to take you outside and teach you a lesson. She says, okay, fine. And she takes them outside, duels them each in succession, leaves all three guys bleeding and wounded on the sidewalk in front of a crowd of people.
This is so weird. I'm picturing spaghetti westerns, I'm picturing Ennio Morricone, you can fight me together, or one at a time, if your honor is so important.
And a lot of the imagery of this, we're back to werewolves again, really makes me think of the absurdly wonderful, weirdo genre mashup film, The Brotherhood of the Wolf. Which is
love
about
that one, man.
kind of French ninjas fighting this mysterious beast of Govaudan. Is that what it was, Ben? It just, I don't know, wandering swordsman, all of this kind of intrigue really gives me Brotherhood of the Wolf vibes.
Yeah. Yeah, and she wounds all three of these guys, puts the sword back, goes back inside, and starts dancing with that woman again. She's arrested again, of course, because dueling is illegal, and you dueled three dudes in front of Louis XIV's castle.
This is also the sexiest thing you could do.
Oh, hell yeah!
When you're meeting someone, I like you. I think we've got a real connection. Hang on, I got to step outside for a second.
Let me just deal with this real quick. I'll be right back.
Hold my beer.
Hold my beer.
Hold my stein, or whatever you call it.
Hold my wine, right?
Yeah, hold my champagne, right?
Yeah, champagne. And with this, we know there is much, much more to the story. And I think that's one of the things we appreciate so much about Badass of the Week. We cannot let you go, Ben, without following up on one thing you slid in a super cool way. You've got a book, huh? You've got a new book coming out?
I'm trying to finish off three things that I've been working on for multiple years now. So I have
the feeling.
Yeah, so I just finished, we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons. So I have been writing D&D adventures, D&D modules.
Are you serious?
Yeah, my friend Brian Snowdy, he's a original alpha magic artist. He's an original D&D illustrator. And so he's doing all the art for them, and I'm writing them. So you can check those out on the website, badassoftheweek.com.
Ben Bolin is a legitimate D&D tabletop player. I am exclusively in the video game realm, but I'm really trying to break out one day.
I'll send it to you. That'd be easy. That's a way I could DM without even actually having to schedule anything.
Awesome.
I can send it to you, right? They're cool.
You guys, what if we did, this is, Max, keep it on air. It might be embarrassing, but what if we did just one time a D&D campaign episode of Ridiculous History.
Oh,
we could do like characters.
Can't you do kind of you can change, you can make it themed, right? Can't you like have the big bad kind of be like some historical villain, you know?
Yeah,
Sure,
you could
sure,
do
that's easy.
you do a one-off kind of contained thing. Anyway,
I like this idea a lot. I think we should back pocket this. What else are you working on, Ben?
So I'm doing the D&D adventures, and then so there's a five books in that series. I just finished those off. I'm working on a book for, so I do Badass, but I also have like a series I do for a younger audience called Guts and Glory. It's for like middle school, high school age, and so I'm working on a book. I'm putting the finishing touches on a book now called Putin versus Zelensky, which is kind of a lead up to the Ukraine war. I don't deal with the Ukraine war, but it's like, why are they fighting and how long have they been? Because those two countries have been fighting each other since like the Viking times.
And it's complex and nuanced.
It's super complex. Yeah,
Yes.
It's super complex and nuanced. There's a lot of stuff happening there. And so I try to spell out the history of why these countries are fighting right now.
I think that's an incredibly valuable thing for young people, because it's so easy growing up with just kind of like a very vague sense of these kinds of things if you learn it in school at all, you know.
Even in the US, there was kind of a vibe of like when the Ukraine war started, there was like a general consensus across the US of like, isn't Ukraine and Russia like the same thing? You know, like weren't you guys just all Soviets? It was all like the same, right? But
we were just talking about Chechnya. They have banned music of a certain beats per minute range in order to be more in keeping of the Chechnyan folk tradition of folk music. And I did not realize that Chechnya was a Russian, you know, I guess vassal state kind of, but that they had also waged war against Russia several times in the past. So all of that the theater of that part of the world is mega nuanced, like you said. And I think it's
really
cool
interesting, right? Because that was the public message that was being put out by the Soviet Union is yes. If you asked like you asked Russia, they would say, yes, we are all the same thing. This is our internal problem, to leave it. And the Ukrainians would be like, no, actually, we're like a whole other thing. We got our whole language, everything. We got our own
Stalin
flag.
and Crimea and like the gifting of it. Now,
there's a whole thing there. So I'm doing a book on that for kids to kind of give them a primer on it. And then I'm also trying to finish off this novel I've been working on for 100 years.
Jeez, overachiever much. Love it.
100 years. But not of solitude.
At least like 4 years I'm working on this thing. So I'm just trying to polish that off too.
Time is different when you're writing, right?
Yeah. I mean, because this is like a personal project, this is the novel is the thing that gets put on hold every time paying work shows up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also, Noel, I'm hearing all this stuff from a fellow Ben out here changing the world. And man, one time I fell asleep trying to put on a pair of pants.
You had that one leg in there. The other one was just too much for you.
It was too much. We cannot wait to hear your opinions about Badass of the Week, folks. Ben Thompson, thank you so much for classing up our show here. Where can people find you and interrupt your work on your novel?
So you can find me at badassoftheweek.com. There's links to everything on there, Facebook, Twitter, all that, Instagram, all that stuff. And like you said, there is a full episode on Julie Daubigny on Badass. And so if you want to check out Badass of the Week podcast, that's anywhere you can get podcasts. You can check that episode out because I think it's a really good one, and people will enjoy it. If you liked what you heard so far, it's kind of just more of that.
We just got to we got some teases, right, for the turn, but we just sort of set up the beginning. So to learn,
she's wanted for death again.
Story.
This is the second time we wanted.
Wow.
Well, should be
and we toyed with the idea of making this a 2-parter, but honestly, like, I think it would benefit you, the listener, yes, you, to get this version of the story, this part of the story, and now pivot ye directly. Get ye not to a nunnery, but to the Badass of the Week podcast feed and or website to get the rest of this incredible, stirring, swashbuckling tale.
You, specifically you. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Mr. Max Williams, Jonathan Strickland, a.k.a. The Quister, A.J. Bahamas Jacobs.
Oh, man. We're actually, I don't know if he listens to every episode, but we know for a fact that he listens to some.
I was just on the Puzzler like a week ago.
Oh, that's awesome. We love
Bahamas.
Yeah. Bahamas was an inexplicable nickname that Ben has gifted AJ, and we love the mystery of it, and it's going to continue. Whenever he writes us, he always describes it coming to us from his own personal Bahamas, wherever that might be, even if it's in like St. Louis. But we're gonna be seeing him pretty soon in person. I don't know. Maybe we just drop that as a little tease Easter egg for him if he happens to hear it. We're making a special trip just to see AJ for a very special book event for his new book, A Year of Living Constitutionally, which we're very excited to be a part of.
Thanks also to Yves Jeffcoat, Christopher Hasiotis, Casey Pegram, since we are in a Francophone episode, a French history episode, and no, thanks to you.
Oh, man, to you as well. We'll see you next time, folks. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.